It's no secret that the State of Origin is the marquee event for the NRL. It's where we see pure athleticism, footy smarts and toughness all combined into the best rivalry in sports. There is always a sense of pride seeing our state victorious, and in this video I want to take a look at your club's greatest State of Origin player. I'll be stating the best player from both New South Wales and Queensland from your club, and also mentioning some honourable mentions. Some rules are that the players can only be selected once, they had to have played Origin whilst at that club, and both club and Origin level performances will be considered in these selections. As always, this video is completely subjective. For the Parramatta Eels, it's Peter Sterling for New South Wales and Arthur Beetson for Queensland. The Eels have a long list of New South Wales Origin talent, which featured the likes of Brett Kenny, Ray Price and Eric Grothe Sr. The cream of the crop of these players has to be Peter Sterling, who is recognised as one of the greatest halves in the history of the sport. With a total of 4 men of the matches in State of Origin, and being a part of the first Blues side to win all 3 Origin games, Sterling definitely left his mark. Some honourable modern day mentions are Jared Hayne, who was a close second, and also Nathan Hindmarsh, who featured in 9 consecutive years of State of Origin play. Arthur Beetson was the Queensland selection, with himself playing in the inaugural Origin game in 1980. He is considered one of the greatest forwards in the sport's history, and with only a handful of Eels ever playing for the Maroons, he was an easy selection. For the Cronulla-Sutherland Sharks, it's Paul Gallen for New South Wales and Valentine Holmes for Queensland. There was little doubt over this, with a long-time New South Wales Blues captain, Paul Gallen, easily taking out this selection. He was not very successful at the Origin level with just 1 series win as captain, but when factoring in his club and international career, he is in my opinion the club's best Blue. An honourable mention was Andrew Ettinghausen, who was also an excellent club servant and a significant member of the Blues. Valentine Holmes was selected for Queensland because of his great performances for the Maroons and Cronulla. For the Brisbane Broncos, it's Wally Lewis for Queensland and Glenn Lazarus for New South Wales. This selection was incredibly hard. The Broncos have more Queensland Origin representatives than any other club with over 100. I went with Wally because simply he's the king. Featuring in the 1988 State of Origin series where Queensland completed their first, New South Wales, Glenn Lazarus was the only option. Clearly the best New South Welshman, as he has played for them 19 times and won 3 premierships with the Brisbane Broncos. For the Canberra Raiders, it's Laurie Daley for New South Wales and Meninga for Queensland. Daley and Meninga remain the biggest names in Canberra Raiders history, and for good reason. The 2 historic superstars combined to win Canberra 3 premierships in 1989, 1990 and 1994. The 2 would match up each year at the State of Origin level, with Laurie Daley getting the best of Mao, winning 4 series in the 6 years. They would both be named in the centenary year's 100 greatest players, highlighting how immense these 2 were. For any viewers who haven't seen these 2 play, definitely look it up on YouTube. I mean, after you finish this video, of course. Some honourable mentions are Ricky Stewart, Jason Croker, Bradley Clyde, and Josh Papali'i. For the Gold Coast Titans, it's Scott Prince and Ashley Harrison for Queensland, and Luke Bailey for New South Wales. With the club's inaugural season in 2007, there weren't many players to choose from for the Gold Coast. The selection of both Scotty Prince and Ashley Harrison was warranted, as both players were incredibly important to the club between 2008 and 2013, helping the Titans reach their highest finishes on the NRL ladder. Harrison would actually feature for the Maroons in a quite underrated career. Luke Bailey was the Blues selection, as he contributed the most to the Titans club, playing alongside the before mentioned Harrison and Prince. Greg Bird was the closest honourable mention, but Bailey's 3 Player of the Years with the Titans got him this spot. For the New Zealand Warriors, it's Ryan Hoffman for New South Wales and Jacob Lilliman for Queensland. With the Warriors roster primarily filled with Kiwis, there were only a handful of Origin players to choose from. Ryan Hoffman is the Warriors' first and only New South Wales Blues representative with his appearance in 2015. For Queensland, I selected Lilliman as he featured for the Maroons from 2011 to 2017, being their most consistent Maroon selection. Steve Price could have also been selected for the Maroons, but I felt he was more suited to be in the Canterbury Bulldogs selection list. For the Sydney Roosters is Brad Fittler for New South Wales and Trevor Gillmeister for Queensland. With 31 appearances for New South Wales, captaining 14 times and also being named in the New South Wales Rugby League Hall of Fame, Fittler was a clear selection for the Roosters, being their best ever Blue. As one of the greatest halves ever, it was hard to select anyone, even stars like James Tedesco and Boyd Cordner. Gillmeister beat off the likes of Adrian Lamb and Paul Vaughton, who were both excellent at the Origin level. Gillmeister, nicknamed the Axe, was a fearless forward who played well above his weight. He featured 22 times for the Maroons and was also a Maroons captain in the 1996 series. Cooper Cronk wasn't selected here because I felt like it was more appropriate him be considered for the Storm. For the Penrith Panthers, it's Nathan Cleary for New South Wales and Petro Sevenasiva for Queensland. With Brad Fittler being selected for the Roosters, Nathan Cleary is the next greatest Blues player. At just 23, Cleary has already led the Blues to 2 Origin Series wins and is likely going to win many more throughout his career. He is currently the best number 7 in the sport and has the potential to become one of the club's and game's greatest players. The selection of Petro may be a bit strange considering he spent most of his career at Brisbane, but because of the lack of Queensland players here, I thought I'd select Petro just to honour his great service for the Queensland Maroons. For the Newcastle Knights, it's Andrew Johns for New South Wales and Darius Boyd for Queensland. The Rugby League's 8th immortal Andrew Johns just had to be the selection. There was no other choice. Johns won the Daley 3 times and was the man of the match in the State of Origin 4 separate times, a remarkable achievement. Some honourable mentions for the Blues are Matt and Kurt Gidley, Danny Badiris and Paul Harrigan. Boyd just beat out Gagai and Ponga, with Boyd having an illustrious State of Origin career. He may have not added much to the Knights during his tenure, but when comparing his resume to Gagai and Ponga, it is much better. Just before we get into the second part of the video, YouTube Analytics says that only 5.4% of you are subscribed, so don't forget if you're enjoying this content to press that button below and subscribe. For the South Sydney Rabbitohs, it's Damien Cook for New South Wales and Greg Inglis for Queensland. With how iconic the Rabbitohs franchise is, I would have thought that they would have had a long list of New South Wales Blues players. But this just wasn't the case. Damien Cook was the best Blues player with competition from Cameron Murray and Brian Fletcher. Fletcher's Origin appearances were mostly during when he played at the Roosters, which is why he missed out. Inglis, as one of the greatest Maroons players ever, was an easy choice. He was awarded the Dally M Fullback of the Year and Dally M Proven Summons medals whilst he was at the Bunnies. Julian O'Neill, Dave Taylor and Dane Gagai were also candidates. For the St George Illawarra Dragons, it's Ben Hornby for New South Wales and Ben Hunt for Queensland. This decision was really hard. Frizzell, Gaznia, Barrett or Cooper could have been chosen, but I picked Hornby because of his consistency and leadership, which helped the club win their first premiership as a joint venture club. Hornby led the club in appearances and is loved by many of the fans. Ben Hunt was only one of 3 options for Queensland, with the others being Darius Boyd, who was already selected, and Neville Costigan. For the West Tigers, it's Robbie Farah for New South Wales and Joe Offengowie for Queensland. Robbie Farah is a West Tigers legend and for good reason. A premiership winner and a State of Origin series winner, at his peak, Farah was second to only Cam Smith. With the majority of Tedesco's success at the Roosters, I didn't consider him here. For Queensland, I chose Joe Offengowie, as he has featured 3 times at the Maroons and is likely to feature again in 2021 after a solid display in Game 1. I could not choose Scotty Prince as he was selected for the Titans, and Harry Grant, who was only on loan from the Storm. For the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, we have Steve Mortimer for New South Wales and Steve Price for Queensland. Steve Mortimer, an inspirational half who captained New South Wales to their first State of Origin win, had 9 caps for both Australia and New South Wales. Mortimer just had an excellent IQ, able to control a match with his kicking game, but also perform courageous try-saving tackles. He is recognised as a top 10 halfback in rugby league history. For Queensland, I picked Steve Price, a premiership winner who played for the Maroons 28 times. He had a tireless work ethic and built himself a reputation of one of the great Canterbury forwards. Some honourable mentions are Andrew Ryan and Terry Lamb. For the Melbourne Storm, it's Cameron Smith for Queensland and Ryan Hoffman for New South Wales. Cam Smith, the most outstanding footy player in the modern era, is often considered the GOAT. With 14 years straight of Maroons appearances, 9 Dally M Hooker of the Years, 4 Wally Lewis medals and 2 Dally M medals, it's hard to argue with that claim. Cooper Cronk, Billy Slater and Cameron Munster would be the best Origin players at most of the clubs in these videos though, but they just can't surpass the great Cam Smith. For New South Wales, Ryan Hoffman was the most consistent Blues and Storm performer, with the Brad Fittler Award for being the best Blues player in the 2014 State of Origin series. I've picked Ryan Hoffman twice because the Warriors didn't have another player to choose from, and he was clearly the best out of all the Storm players. I know that goes against the rules, I'm very sorry. Honourable mentions are Josh Adokar, Brett White and Robbie Kearns. For the North Queensland Cowboys, it's Johnathan Thurston for Queensland and James Tamou for New South Wales. JT is one of the more revolutionary halves we have seen, with an excellent kicking boot, elusiveness and an extraordinary playmaking ability. Thurston would feature in 12 straight State of Origin series and would win a Wally Lewis medal, 4 Dally M Player of the Years and a premiership in a storied career. Matty Bowen and Michael Morgan are both honourable mentions. For New South Wales, it's James Tamou, who featured in 4 consecutive series and really had only competition from Luke O'Donnell. For the Manly Meninga Seagulls, it's Steve Menzies for New South Wales and Paul Vaughton for Queensland. Both of these legends were Manly icons, who bled their club's colours. With 500 appearances for the club between them, there are no players that have given more to the club. Vaughton for Queensland featured 22 times, whilst Menzies featured for New South Wales 20 times. Both men won multiple series with their states and were Daley M medalist winners. Some honourable mentions are Jeff Tuvey, Daley Cherry Evans, Jamie Lyon, Michael O'Connor, the Travojeviches and Jamie Lyon. So that ends this video looking at your club's greatest state of origin player. If you have any other suggestions, let me know in the comments section below. Also, I have an NRL documentary coming out next week, so if you're excited for that, like, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're notified when the next video comes out. Just letting you viewers know, I'm now active on TikTok, so you can go view some stuff over there, and we've just hit 5,000 subscribers, so a big thank you to you all.